USPAP page 234, Jurisdictional Exemption Rule continued. Number 108. When compliance with USPAP is precluded by law or regulation. Question: can a jurisdictional exemption take away from the requirements of USPAP? Response: yes. The jurisdictional exemption rule provides for the situation in which compliance with parts of USPAP may be precluded by law or regulation in certain jurisdictions. It states, if any applicable law or regulation precludes compliance with any part of USPAP, only that part of USPAP becomes void for that assignment. As stated in the comment to the jurisdictional exemption rule. The jurisdictional exemption rule provides a saving or severability clause intended to preserve the balance of USPAP in compliance with one or more of its parts is precluded by the law or regulation of a jurisdiction. When an appraiser properly follows the rules, this rule in disregarding a part of USPAP, there is no violation of USPAP. The comment to the jurisdictional exemption rule also includes language that helps appraisers recognize laws and regulations. Number 109, probate court statute basing the appraisal fee on the appraised value. Question: a property is being appraised for a probate court in a state which has a statute stipulating that appraisal fees for these assignments shall be based on the appraised value of the property. Does USPAP allow me to appraise the property under this compensation arrangement? Response: yes. This is an example where the jurisdictional exemption rule applies. In order to comply with the requirements of the jurisdictional exemption rule, the appraiser must disclose in the appraisal report the reasons that prohibit compliance with USPAP and cite the basis for the jurisdictional exemption. Number 110. Appropriate sources for jurisdictional exemption. Question: my client's attorney has told me to invoke the jurisdictional exemption rule to avoid mentioning in my appraisal report an underground storage tank that I know exists in the property. The attorney did not provide any reference or citation of law or regulation justifying this action. Can I follow the instruction from this attorney who is representing my client? Response: no. Use the jurisdictional exemption rule. Use of the jurisdictional exemption rule is triggered by a conflict between the requirements of USPAP and the law or regulation of a jurisdiction, not by client discretion. The jurisdictional exemption rule states, If any applicable law or regulation precludes compliance with any part of USPAP, only that part of USPAP becomes void for that assignment. This rule provides a saving or severability clause when compliance with a part or parts of USPAP is precluded by law or regulation. The first sentence of the comment to the rule states, the jurisdictional exemption rule provides a saving and severability clause intended to preserve the balance of USPAP in compliance with one or more of its parts is precluded by the law or regulation of a jurisdiction. When an appraiser properly follows this rule in disregarding a part of USPAP, there is no violation of USPAP. Page 235. The second paragraph in the comment also provides explicit descriptions of laws and regulations that appraisers can use to determine when use of the jurisdictional exemption rule is acceptable. It is important to note that the parameters described in the comment apply regardless of the intended use of the assignment. Whether it is an appraisal or appraisal review, or whether the type and definition of value is market value, or if it is some other type of value. An attorney's instruction without specific citation of law or regulation is not the equivalent of law or regulation. Attorneys may offer legal opinions, but legislative bodies and courts make laws, and administrative agencies establish regulations. While an attorney is an expert in the practice of law, it is the court that decides if the facts in a matter support an attorney's representation of how established law applies to a specific set of facts. Absent the citation of law or regulation, which should be cited in the report together with the part or parts of USPAP from which compliance is precluded in the assignment, the attorney's instruction is not acceptable as a basis to disregard a part or parts of USPAP applicable in the assignment. Number 111, valuation methods and jurisdictional exemption rule. Question: I am doing an appraisal assignment for a government agency that is subject to the provisions of the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisitions Act of 1970, as amended, commonly known as the Uniform Act, and its implementing regulation. 49 CFR Part 24. The agency has provided me with a reference to a state court of appeals ruling which indicates that standing timber and landscaping impacted by a public project must be appraised based on the value it contributes to the subject property as a whole, and not as individual items. They have informed me that this appeals case is frequently cited in condemnation cases and almost always upheld by trial courts in this state. Based on this court decision, the agency has adopted a policy that all standing timber and landscaping be valued in this manner. On this issue of landscaping, does using contributory value versus replacement value constitute a jurisdictional exemption? Response: no. The jurisdictional exemption rule does not apply in the circumstance, since there are no requirements in USPAP addressing the proper valuation techniques for standing timber and landscaping. The rule only applies when there is a conflict between the requirements of USPAP and the applicable law or regulation of a jurisdiction. USPAP requires that in the development of an appraisal, an appraiser must be aware of, understand, and correctly employ those recognized methods and techniques that are necessary to produce a credible appraisal. Further, the competency rule requires recognition of and compliance with laws and regulations that apply to the appraiser or to the assignment. The agency policy on the valuation of standing timber and landscaping is an assignment condition and must be considered in the scope of work decision. However, an appraiser cannot perform an assignment with a condition that would produce assignment results which are not credible in the context of the intended use.